Good morning. Yesterday, a pretty good topic popped up on the group. I simply created a topic about erythritol. Where does it come from? How do you use it? How is it made? There were a series of questions that went along with it. Some of it is non-GMO. Some of it's made from different types of bacteria or mold or something like that. Some of it's naturally reoccurring in food and doesn't seem to be a problem. The biggest majority of it is genetically modified from stuff like corn, put through the fermentation process. And the issue with that is you have chemical products and stuff like glyphosate. These are Dr. Berg did a video on this where he talked about erythritol and the issue with GMO erythritol, because it's made from fermented corn. It's made from stuff that's genetically modified, and it has chemical properties and stuff, or compound that's used to glyphosate, and it's one of the deadly chemicals that's used on food, but they allow them to keep doing that. In the grand scheme of things, it's probably best not to use it, especially if it's a GMO product. There are things over thousands of years that have changed. We used to genetically modify stuff all the time, alter the state of a natural thing in order to produce more or bigger, but it was in a more natural way of doing it. Now it's all chemical based, injecting, DNA changing, and then we eat stuff like that. Well, that led into another topic about bulletproof coffee. Doctors, I don't ever say his name right. Dr. Zarowski. He's a doctor that he's only got about 60,000 subscribers on his YouTube channel, and it's growing. He's a very young, very smart doctor. He talks about bulletproof coffee and a contrary belief to it not breaking your intermittent fast. He actually believes the same as I do, that it does break your fast. If you're ingesting any kind of calories in a fasted state, it doesn't matter if insulin is produced or not, your fast has to be broken, because fasting means to omit. Fasting simply means to remove food from, or an item from. So if I'm fasting, that means I'm not having caloric intake. That means it's water and minerals. That's what it is. So the excuse that people give about Dr. Berry says you can have fat during a fasting state, sure you can, and it won't spike insulin and it won't put a weight on your body, but you're not fasting. You're intaking a caloric dietary nutrient of some sort. That is not fasting. Fasting means to omit. So we started looking at the PubMed articles and stuff like that, and sure enough, erythritol does spike insulin a little bit. It does affect your mTOR production. It does affect ADP. It does affect those things, and when it does those things, momentarily it does spike insulin. It does produce a small insulin secretion. No matter what you do, you cannot get past that. If we know dopamine is controlled by insulin response, and whenever you eat something or drink something pleasurable, dopamine is released, you have to have insulin response. Dopamine is your pleasure sensation, your pleasure hormone. So if we know that's also controlled partially by insulin or completely by insulin, then we know we have to secrete it in order for that to happen. Based on the amount of insulin that's secreted, that's how we know the amount of dopamine release that's going on. If you look in the PubMed articles, you can, and I'm not saying that's 100% accurate, exactly how I'm explaining it, because I'm still new getting into this part of the hormone function and stuff. But we know insulin and dopamine are triggered together. So if one's getting triggered, the other one's also getting triggered in some way, shape, or form. And looking at the PubMed articles, when you go on it, you can type in erythritol, you can type in fasting, you can find tons of information that's been studied. And now recently I looked at the bottom of this diabetic article where it was talking about diabetics consuming erythritol and the function that it, or the effect that it had on the body. One of the main things that they noticed is erythritol changed your gut drive or biome per se, or enzyme, or your enzyme the building blocks momentarily change, and it slows, not building blocks, I'm not saying it correctly. I hope you guys get what I'm saying when I say it. It has an effect on your digestive tract. It slows your gastric emptying, and it says right at the bottom of the article, does not show to have significant insulin does not show to have significant insulin increase, but it is there. They do see it. So to say that erythritol and bulletproof coffee and stuff like that does not affect insulin, that would not be correct. You still have to process that fat out, and anytime a cell has to take in some kind of nutrients, anytime it has to take it somewhere, that cell momentarily stops its ketotic phase, but it stops its autophagy phase. And autophagy is basically when one is eating oneself. So the cells are eating the fat on your body, or eating dead cells, things that attach to skin tags, psoriasis, things of that nature. Now you'll go to other YouTube channels and stuff, and you'll hear them talk about the frou-frou, the I want to tell you what you want to hear because that's what you want to hear junk, because they simply don't know themselves. I mean, honestly, they don't dig into enough of the research to actually be able to talk about it. They'll read a book here or there, and they'll claim that they know exactly what's going on, and that's not the case. I was looking at a bunch of YouTube channels yesterday that have much more subscribers to me, and all I could do was shake my head because I'm thinking to myself, wow, there's so much like lack of information and lack of studying and lack of understanding, and to build a YouTube channel around that and put information out to people without being able to talk about the studies and stuff, it just boggles my mind. I actually went on PubMed yesterday and was looking on articles for several hours just about erythritol and fasting and insulin secretion and what has been studied. And there's all kinds of information there that actually talk about small forms of insulin being secreted when ingesting some kind of fat or some kind of artificial sweetener. I mean, it breaks your fasted state. While it's having to digest the fat, your body has to process that out. So if your body has to process that out and your cell has a function of autophagy, or being in a fasted state like eating your own fat, it no longer has a reason to do that. So whatever cells at that time are processing the dietary fat that you took in, they're no longer going to be in that state. It's not going to, they're going to have a different function at this time. And then the priority has changed. The priority has switched from I want to eat the dead cells in your body and the fat on your body for fuel to now I want to get rid of this dietary intake that you've just given me. And you may have enough energy expenditure at that given time, for a half hour, for an hour, whatever it is, before it actually goes back to doing what it did. I mean, I don't know. I just feel like too many people make excuses for the things that they do because they're so used to doing it and they think it's their right to do it, which it is. But as I've always said, own up to it and stop calling it. Stop using some science experiment or what some doctor says as your excuse. Just say, this is what I want to do. I get a kick out of people that, well, science says that erythritol doesn't spike insulin and blood sugar, so why should I not be able to use it? Because it is artificial. Because your body does not necessarily need artificial junk. Because it is a GMO product and it's fermented from corn, more than likely you're probably not paying for a 100% clean product, more than likely. So it's not about the science anymore. It's not about it's not going to hurt me anymore. It's more about personal choice. If you want to make the choice to put that stuff in your body, then own up to it and say, look, I just chose to drink it because I like it. If I'm still losing weight while I'm doing it, that's fine. Even if I'm not in a fasted state and I'm losing weight while I'm doing it, that's still fine. But I'm going to have it because I want it. Don't put it on science, because science does not actually say what a lot of people say that it says. They don't actually understand what it says in order to recite it properly. And not only that, if everything goes back to science, but yet we look at each other and we talk about how science has been skewed for so many years, how can we pick and choose what we want to listen to? How can today this study's okay, but tomorrow we'll generalize science as something that's been bought and paid for? It boggles my mind why so many people want to stand behind it. How many times have we found it to be completely wrong by, science says that your body needs carbohydrates and sugar to survive. No, it doesn't. We've been doing it for thousands of years without it. So how's your science accurate? It just doesn't make sense. Anyway, the short of the story is what we ended up coming up with is, you know what, we do realize that somewhat even bulletproof coffee will spike insulin to a sense, especially if you're making a 400 or 500 calorie bulletproof coffee like most people do, which I think is completely ridiculous. But I looked up one of Dr. Jason Fung's articles on Diet Doctor, and he was answering some questions, and one of the ladies said, could I have bone broth while I'm fasting? And his response to that was, absolutely. There's tons of minerals that you can benefit from while being in a fasted state and drinking bone broth. That was his answer to that. But he also says, somebody posted that Dr. Jason Fung says that you can have fat in your coffee up to 5 times a day, 1 teaspoon or something like that. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I've never heard him say that. Like, I remember people posting on the group that Dr. Jason Fung says you can have some fat with your coffee, but I've never heard him say 5 times a day, 5 tablespoons in 20 or teaspoons in 24 hours. I don't know how true that is. I really don't know if I believe that, because whenever I look at Dr. Jason Fung's stuff and how he replies to people, it doesn't seem like he's really that big of a fan of it. So, like, even if he did say that at one time, when you look at his responses to people, it doesn't look like he really wants people having fat in their coffee. Like, this one girl asked about bulletproof coffee, and he said, you know what, on Diet Doctor it says that it's coming right from Fung, his website, and how he responds. It says, I wouldn't mind somebody putting just a tad bit, just enough to change the color of your coffee, of some like heavy cream, but even at that, that's iffy. I don't know that I would be doing that, but I think that might be okay. He doesn't say nothing that I've seen so far about 5 tablespoons or teaspoons of fat. And even if he did, when you read his responses to people, he almost seems like he's reluctant to say that. Like, he doesn't necessarily believe that 100%. Like, he says it's okay, you could get by, but it's probably not to your best interest to do it, is how I'm reading it. And it's not just because that's how I want to see it, even though it is. That's what he said. Maybe just a little tiny bit of cream, some heavy cream or something would be okay to basically change the color of your coffee. But he didn't even really, by his wording, it didn't look like he even wanted to give that recommendation. He just wants people to mineral fast. This topic comes up a lot. It's like one of the oldest beat up topics. And I think the one thing that we can all agree on is, if you don't have the stuff, you're going to be 100% spot on with fasting. If you just have some minerals, you know, sodium, potassium, some water, and you fast, you can't go wrong there. There's no debating that. That's going to be a good fast. But the one thing that we all, you know, have our issues with and stuff like that is the bulletproof coffee fasting. So if the general consensus is not having it is going to yield you great results and better results, then why is the other even an option? We know that ingesting any kind of caloric intake is probably not the best deal while fasting. Nobody in the history of time has ever added fat into their diet while fasting. They either fast or they don't fast. That's it. But now we have people that come along and they try to reinvent the wheel, and they want to make it comfortable for people, because I feel like if people would learn to train more and engage that hunger hormone ghrelin and learn to become a more stricter version of themselves and actually put some effort into it, they wouldn't have to make the excuses for the artificial sweeteners. They wouldn't have to make the excuses for the fat bombs and bulletproof coffees and stuff like that. They would just say, look, I'm worth it. I'm worth putting the time in. I'm going to learn how to do this without that stuff, and let's move forward. But people don't do that. They make, you know, all these excuses why they need to have the bulletproof coffee while fasting, why they have to have fat bombs and stuff, and it just shocks me, because it's not how it should be. But who am I? I'm not a scholar. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a philosopher. I'm the keto mechanic. Anyhow, that's this morning's talk. Well, that lady almost pulled out right in front of me. I hate when people pull up to the stop sign, but they don't pull up to the stop sign. They pull through the stop sign and they stop in the street. And she did not look like she was stopping. Y'all would have caught that on video. Anyhow, I appreciate you guys. God bless. Keto on, carnivore on. And remember, this is your journey. You got to live it. Try to do it the healthy way.